In the last video, we looked at the ETS website, which is of course a resource that you're going to have to use, and it has a lot of things going for it, and so definitely don't miss out on that. But inevitably, if you're studying for any period of time, you're going to realize that there's not a lot of content there and that you probably want to pick up some sort of prep book just for maybe more strategies or just more practice tests to work through. So in this video, we're going to go over some of the most commonly used prep books, as well as some other physical resources that people will often use when studying for the test. To start off with, we're going to look at some of the dedicated GRE prep books out there. In my experience working with all the students that I've tutored, if I ask them if they have a book and they say yes, it typically is one of these four. So here we have the ETS official GRE test prep series, which they sell this on the website. So a lot of people will just check out when they sign up for the test and purchase a set of these. These other books just come from the big test prep companies, and you can find these in most bookstores or on Amazon. So we have the Kaplan GRE Prep Plus, the Manhattan Prep 5-pound book, which Manhattan Prep puts out other books, but I find that a majority of the time people pick up the 5-pound book. And we also have the Princeton Review Cracking the GRE. To start, let's look at the ETS Powerprep series. So the nice thing about this set of books is that it is written by the people who make the test, which means that everything in here is going to be accurate and they're going to be thorough in the way that they go through the test. So one of the problems with some of the other test companies is that you'll find that they either go beyond the confines of the test or they miss certain aspects that they ought to be covering. And you won't find that with these books. Everything here is relevant to the test. You don't have to worry about inaccuracies and things like that. The other nice thing is that they aren't pushing out new editions every year, which means if you find a used copy from a couple years ago or you check a copy out from your library, it's probably going to be just as good as a brand new copy. So it's pretty easy to find these used, and I would recommend picking these up used because there really isn't a benefit to buying a new set. There are a couple downsides to this series of books. The most common complaint I get from students who have been working out of them is that they find them extremely dense. So because the test makers have written these books, they go to great lengths to make sure they've covered everything that could possibly be on the test. And so as a result, you have a lot of sections that are dedicated to things that are relatively uncommon or hard to understand, but are technically things that you should know if you want to be 100% prepared for the test. So if you are looking to score extremely high, this can be a good book for you. But if you are just looking for sort of a 50th to 60th or 70th percentile score, they might go beyond the scope of what you're trying to do. The other thing is that they can be hard to self-teach. So whereas the other prep companies are looking to sort of hold your hand and teach you strategies for the test, these books are just going to give you bare bones, here's the stuff you need to know, without a lot of shortcuts or ways to beat the test. Another set of books that's relatively common is the Kaplan GRE Prep Plus series, and I find that these are a good set of books, and I would recommend them generally to most test takers because they are well rounded. They have strong sections in writing, verbal, and quantitative, and they go to great lengths to teach you strategies for each type. So they are looking to show you where the pitfalls are. They are looking to teach you specific strategies and templates you can follow for the writing, and so it is really good in that way. Also, if you purchase these books new, you get access to their website, which, at least for a month, which can be a really good tool if you're just looking for a larger collection of practice questions and practice tests to take. There are a couple downsides to this set of books. The first one is that I find the difficulty scales poorly. So, especially in the quantitative section, when they start to ramp their questions up, what they tend to do is just make them take longer by sort of taking what would be maybe two or three separate questions and find ways to jam them together into one question, which isn't really how the difficulty scales on the test. The actual GRE pushes you in terms of abstract or complex thinking or finding clever ways to solve a question quickly, not just making it take several lines of algebra and arithmetic. The other thing I find is that they teach methods that are specific to the questions that they write, And so you can find that you're getting better at their questions and passing their tests with higher accuracy. But if all you did was study the Kaplan books, you might go to the test and find that the actual GRE is just slightly different in some ways and not do very well. And I'm not saying that they aren't a good set of books, they definitely are. Only that if you plan to study out the Kaplan books, make sure that you go beyond them and go check out the real ETS tests and make sure that the strategies that you've learned are applicable and you can find ways to make them work on an actual GRE. Manhattan Prep also puts out their own line of GRE prep books. I know there's quite a few of them, but I'm actually only familiar with the 5 pound book. I find that a lot of people who are looking for prep material seem drawn to this book when it's on the shelf at Barnes& and Noble or something like that. And to be sure, it is a great book. So the one thing that it definitely has going for it is its high quantity. You're not going to find any other book that has the sheer amount of practice problems as the 5 pound book. And from my experience, they're pretty good in general, at least the quantitative. The quantitative sections are very challenging and deep, and they even go beyond the scope of the test, which for some people that's not a good thing. But if you are looking to push a very high score, you really need to be well adapted to those extremely difficult problems, and I find that they do a better job than any of the other uh, prep companies out there, like Kaplan and Princeton. I also believe that they give out access to their website with this, although I'm not sure. And of course, you have to be careful when buying used or secondhand products if one of the things that you want is access to some sort of online tests. With the high quantity comes a sort of predictable weakness in that the strategies that they try to employ and the explanations they give are relatively shallow and kind of scattered. The quantitative portion of this book, which is a majority of it, is aimed mostly at people who are looking to just drill particular concepts, like arithmetic or probability or geometry, rather than someone who's trying to build up strategies for the types of questions on the test, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I find that this is a great place to try to shore up weaknesses in particular math concepts. Although the one thing that I do have a big problem with is that the verbal sections tend to be pretty shallow. The questions can be kind of challenging, but usually because of the vocabulary, not necessarily because of the complexity of the setup. And so what they do, and really this is kind of a problem that a lot of test prep companies struggle with, is that they just push the content. So they push you to learn the formulas, they push you to learn a lot of vocabulary, because they know that that will increase your score on the test. But really when you get to the GRE, what's more important than just having a large vocabulary is being able to work with these complicated sentences and understand the patterns on the test. Another note, not much has really changed between the editions, so don't feel bad picking up an older edition of this book. I find that all they've really done is just shuffled the questions around, and there really isn't new content with the new editions that are coming out. And the last of the 4 main books that I want to talk about is the Princeton Review, the Cracking the GRE book that they put out each year. And I find that a lot of students have a very positive response to this. They find that it's the easiest to follow. So the strategies that they teach you here tend to be pretty simple. And even if you've been out of math classes or you don't do much writing or reading, the strategies that they teach you are easy to understand and easy to implement. Um, the other thing is that it tends to be the most self-teachable book. So whereas you might really need a tutor or someone you trust to help you with the ETS books or the Kaplan books or definitely the Manhattan books, um, typically you can get yourself through the Princeton Review book on your own. So with this comes some pretty predictable weaknesses. The first one, of course, is that it lacks depth. It's not that what they're preparing you for isn't accurate to the GRE, it is, but the strategies that they give you and the types of practice questions they're going to give you are going to prepare you best for easy, medium style questions, and you might get stumped by some of the more difficult questions on the test. So if you're looking to push a very high score, the Princeton Review is going to sort of fall short of that. Also, same as Manhattan, I find that they are just trying to push vocab over complexity with a lot of the verbal section. So rather than teach you complex methods for breaking down sentences and learning all these nuances, their goal is really to just sort of push a 500 or 1000 most commonly used words on you because they know that it'll result in you scoring slightly better on the test. Lastly, the book itself has a pretty low quantity of questions, so you might find that you're just running out of practice tests or practice material if this is the only thing you pick up. Now, of course, it does come with a subscription or at least a discount to their online resource, which is pretty robust and does have a lot of practice material. So if your goal is to sign up for their online material, then by all means purchase this and use that discount. But if this is the only book you get, you're going to run out of material pretty quickly. So you might be thinking, okay, that's great, but which book should I get? Which one is best for me? So here's my recommendation for all four of these books based on who you are as a test taker and what your goals are for the test. So if you consider yourself a good test taker and you've looked over the material and you've said, I think I already have a good handle on all that, then I would recommend the ETS Powerprep. Like I said before, it's pretty dense and it's not going to walk you through stuff, but it does cover everything in great detail. However, if you're someone who prefers methods, you want to know tips and tricks and what to look out for, and you also need to do well on all three sections, the writing, the verbal, and the quant, I would recommend picking up Kaplan. If you're someone who's very motivated and you just want a lot of questions to work through, you're someone who can sit down and work through 50, 60, 70 questions at a time, and if you're really looking to push a top tier quantitative score, the Manhattan Prep 5-pound book is going to be great for that. And lastly, if you're a weaker test taker, you're starting from the basics, you think I haven't been in a math class for a long time, and if you have less time to prepare and you really just want to get like a crash course on like, well, how can I at least know what I'm looking at and get the best score that I can without too much work, I would recommend the Princeton Review. I know that there are other prep books out there that I haven't mentioned, but I'm just not familiar enough with them, and from my experience, they aren't really that common, and so if you are going out to buy a book, you're probably choosing between one of those four. However, there is another type of book that I will occasionally recommend or people will come to me with, and it's just generic math review books. So, not specific to the GRE, of course, there are tons of books out there that are just meant to help you improve your geometry or your algebra, and I think that these are pretty good, at least to start off with, for three reasons. If you find that you've been out of math classes for a long time and you've forgotten all the basics, you don't know the area of a triangle, you don't know how to solve for a polynomial or something like that, then it makes sense to go back to these books. Also, if you find that you're making a lot of careless mistakes, whether that's mental math or as you're working through algebraic equations, similarly, if you find that your arithmetic and algebra is very slow and you're going over time, you might not have a choice but to go back to some basic resources like math review books to get those skills back. I know people don't like to hear it, but there really isn't a cure for being slow or careless other than to drill those problems until you stop making those mistakes. The GRE is a time test, and so there is a lot of emphasis put on how quickly and how accurately you can get through some of the math.